And he expresses anguish for the future of the land that he loves and wants to keep loving, the state of Israel. In another time, he would be a prophet, and the Christian Bible that Ahmed Deedat knows so well might well contain a new book, a book of Shahak. He's a modern-day prophet, calling upon his own people in Israel to repent their sins against their neighbors, trying to awaken at the same time the people of the United States to the grim and awful truth about what is really happening inside the state of Israel. He expresses his warning and his anguish in Washington, D.C., which is just exactly the right place, because the U.S. government is the lifeline for the state of Israel. Therefore, the people of America should know the reality of the Middle East, because they must accept the blame, much of the blame, for what is happening in Israel, because they are indeed the lifeline without which Israel could not survive. Prophet Shahak's usual weapon is the written word. Every month, he seeks out in the Hebrew language press of Israel facts about happenings within that state. He translates these into English and sends copies of the translation to a number of periodicals in the United States. This report is critically important because it reviews Israel's Hebrew press, not Israel's English press. It is the Hebrew press that describes reality in Israel. For one thing, the Hebrew press reports accurately what Prime Minister Shamir has to say. It tells the truth about Shamir's thoughts. Israel Shahak says, and I quote him, "Shamir lies only in English." End of quote. That is to say, if you really want to know what is on Shamir's mind, listen to what he has to say in Hebrew. The English press in Israel is tailor-made for foreign consumption, designed mainly for the people of the United States, to support and reinforce the powerful effect of Israel's lobby in the United States, where all that is good about Israel is emphasized and exaggerated, and all that is evil is ignored or rationalized. In contrast, the Hebrew press in Israel tells it like it is. Each month, Israel Shahak seeks out and translates into English those portions of the Hebrew press that reflect true conditions about that country, true trends within Israel, and facts about what is really happening within the occupied territory in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel Shahak, like myself, speaks mainly without gestures, but his words come like thunder, and his words help to answer the question of this symposium. That very fundamental and searching question: is Israel set up for destruction? Or more precisely, perhaps, is Israel setting itself up for destruction? Listen to the words, the evidence from this Israeli citizen, Israel Shahak. Not evidence from myself, who some say has a certain bias, but from this illustrious citizen of Israel who has no anti-Israeli bias whatever. Listening to Israel Shahak speak and reading his commentaries, one cannot miss towering evidence of self-destruction. Working within Israel's Jewish citizens are forces that are literally shaking society to its very roots. If Israel is set up for destruction, the forces of greatest menace to its survival come from within and are largely Israel's own making. Israel Shahak draws somber and sobering parallels between events in Nazi Germany in the 1930s and what is happening within Israel today. In Nazi Germany, Jews were treated as subhumans, as things to be manipulated, to be abused, to be humiliated, to be destroyed. And Hitler's first goal was to make life so miserable that Jews would leave Germany. He wanted the Jews simply to pack out and leave Europe. There was no thought in those early years of destroying the Jews in the death camps. The final solution did not come until years later. And today, in many ugly, terrible ways, the leaders of Israel are saying of the Palestinians, they must go, they must get out, just like the Nazi message to the Jews in Europe, you must go, you must get out. Indeed, They Must Go is the title of a book, a very candid book, written by Israel's candid but popular rabbi politician Meir Kahane. And Kahane is not the only one who harbors these terrible thoughts that the Palestinians must pack up and go. They must go is the unspoken solution of the Israelis to the Palestinian problem. And it's a solution that is accepted and supported by many Israelis and many Israeli politicians, not just Rabbi Meir Kahane. Israel's goal is clearly to make life so miserable that Palestinians will leave the occupied territory. To their Israeli masters, Palestinians are not people, they are subjects. They are not human beings, they are not children of God, they are things. Israel is engaged in a giant, awful squeeze play on the Palestinians, a pincer movement against them. The Palestinians are relentlessly being forced into ever smaller areas of land with ever reduced amounts of water on which to survive. Opportunities for education, for health care, for telephone service are often interrupted and on an unpredictable schedule. Take water. Israel speaks of the theft of water. Cruel, ugly, frightening. Let me explain. The Palestinians in the West Bank of the occupied territory get only a meager amount of water per person. 17% of the available water is allocated to the Palestinians in the West Bank. The rest is diverted to the Jewish settlers who occupy ever-growing portions of the West Bank. A Jewish settler in the West Bank gets 12 times as much water as a Palestinian in that same area. And enormous Palestinian-held areas could be irrigated, but the areas lie barren because Israel refuses to permit irrigation. Only when land is taken for Jewish settlements is irrigation permitted. In Gaza, the situation is much worse. Palestinian food production is systematically dried up and destroyed, while that of the Jewish settlers in the Gaza is flourishing. Listen to this terrible fact. 40% of Gaza is reserved for a mere 2,500 Jewish settlers, while another 40% must be divided among 700,000 people. That means that the Jewish settlers in Gaza have 280 times as much land on which to survive as do the Palestinians. Israel Shahak explains in one of his translations from the Hebrew press just how this is done. And I quote from Israel Shahak: "By their efficient deep drilling, the Israeli settlements cause the seawater, the salt seawater, to enter the underground reservoirs tapped by the Palestinians.